Okay, so let's get some of these past lives because you've got this gal who is going nuts. Who's going nuts. She is dressed all in red. And all right, this is a very adventurous life. And she's saying she is with you because you are meant to have a bold, adventurous life. She is like all in, like, okay, she's showing two images of herself, the early part of her life and the later part of her life. And the early part of her life, she was a very wealthy English woman. And she's showing her in her 20s dressed in this red velvet gown with a hat and feathers, and it's like a long formal gown, not quite a hoop skirt, but a lot of like petticoats, so that it, and like embroidery and frogging, and she's very wealthy, and her hair is all done in ringlets. She says it takes a minimum of three people to dress her in the morning. And she says at her time, she must change her clothing, her outfits, 3 to 5 times a day. And it can take up to an hour to be fully dressed, depending on, she said it can be as short as 20 minutes. So this is a wealthy, prominent woman. They're showing a beautiful house in London, a big mansion house with a yard. So, and then they have several country estates. They have one place close to London that has a lot of horses and like wheat farm and the like, and beautiful flower gardens. And this is close to London because they need all the flower arrangements and stuff. Um, and then there's another estate further out with like, almost like a castle type mansion, and that's the family estate. And she says, when she was young, this was not her estate, this was her cousin's estate, but she's supposed to marry him, and he's a titled member of the family. Um, this is early, like where she was born around 18, she says 1808. Okay. Um, no, she's telling me 1828. 1828 was when she was born. So when she's 23 and she's married and she's like Miss Lady of Society, she's it. Um, and her name isn't coming through yet, but it will. She's like stunningly beautiful. She's tall, but not, she says, not too tall, but she's taller than most women. But there's, yeah. And she's got this like gorgeous figure. Um, and like she said in those days, like the hourglass figure. But she said we enhanced. There was a lot of padding around here to make it go out, which made the waist look smaller. And there's a lot of padding in here to push things. She says, "You think the push-up bra is new?" No. um, and um, and she said she had beautiful shoulders and like you, beautiful clavicles and um, blondish hair that she said was like down to here and it was naturally wavy. So she had the whole thing done with ringlets and curls and ribbons and bows. And so she says you already know her lifestyle. And she enjoyed her life because she was extremely clever and she loved reading. She loved reading, but she excelled at all the womanly arts. And she had a very good organizational sense. And she's like, you could learn from her. She says, you're okay, but she's really good. She tries to help you with this. But she could put together a ball, an entire ball that would be considered like the best ball of the season. She said, of course, it helped that she had a lot of servants and, a butler, several under butlers, like all of that. Like they had money to spare. Um, and Okay, so her husband became a bit ill, and they decided to go to the Mediterranean to help him with his health. Um, she said there was a bit of inbreeding in their family, because they're always trying to keep the money and titles in the family. And so, well, perimeter relatives would marry outside. So there was always introduction of fresh blood. Basically, her husband was a little bit inbred. And he was sweet as could be, not that bright, but he just loved a jolly time. He was just like fun. And he had a younger brother who was more clever, but did not have the social graces. So the two of them sort of ran everything together. She said, which is good because if we're up to her husband, he would have lost the estate at the table or the ponies. And he loved gambling. But under agreement with her brother-in-law, um, her husband was kept on a strict budget. And he was so jolly that when he was done with money, he's like, I'm done now. So where are the ladies? Where's the cognac? I need to get up and wander off for some other entertainment. So he was a very good husband. It treated you very, very well. So when he became ill, you're like, well, I got to take care of this because I don't want to become the dowager in the granny flat in the back of some country bumpkin estate. So you took him off to the Mediterranean, and you all rented this beautiful, basically a castle there, which you could call a lovely summer home kind of. No concept of value among this. Um, but he got ill and he died. And you said, I'm only 26. We were married 3 years. I only gave him two children. They were both girls. I'm screwed. Um, and and you knew that like your brother-in-law would not like do wrong by you, but there's laws in place. There's only so much that could happen. And you didn't, you're like, what was the point of my life? I mean, I followed the formula. I was perfect. I did everything I was supposed to do, the best it could be done. And now look at me. I'm among barbarians and heathens because they're all Catholics. Your Church of England. I'm among barbarians and heathens in the middle of this godforsaken paradise. Um, so you you didn't want your girls to go through this. Like you're 26 and everyone's basically saying your life is over. You have to try to find yourself another husband. And you're like, all the men are looking at the debutantes, the girls who are coming out. I don't want to get someone's scraps. I had true love so you said, we're going to go on a journey. And okay, so here's where it gets interesting. You loved vibrant colors. And this is one thing that always stood out on you from the other debutantes who are always wearing like pale blue, pale pink, white, washed out yellow. You were wearing like red, green, you know. Um, you heard tell that in India they have vibrant colors. And you had money. You had money and property in your name. You're being a little melodramatic when it comes to now what will come of us because you had plenty. And you said, I'm going to make myself. I'm tired of having to define myself as how the men in society tell me I am. And I'm tired of seeing all these pale, I don't want to see all these pale washed out girls get all the husbands away from me. So you packed up your girls and you went to India and you set up an import export business because you said there was saffron colors, red and orange, and you said it was so vibrant. You sometimes you would um you would go into your warehouse with all of these beautiful cloth. Dealt predominantly with cloth. There were other items that were like the ones that could bring in guaranteed money, such as some spices and furniture. But the cloth, oh my God. And she said, and in India, you don't have to wear 20 million pounds of clothing and you don't have to wear a corset. Um, so you would even dress more like the Indian women, which made you quite a sight with your blonde hair, which became more and more blonde with the sunlight. And and you said in India, everyone would swim in the water. You raised your girls with India standards. You said, and you saw other expats in India trying to pretend they're like even more British than they were. You know, tea every afternoon, 3 p.m., no matter what. And like wearing all this clothing. And you're like, the women would faint right and left all the time. But you wore saris and like, you learned how to dance like the Indian women. You said, this is my culture. That you felt like, even though you did not believe in reincarnation, that they did. So you said you felt like you had been Indian in past lives, that you may even have been a holy person because you just loved Hinduism and Buddhism and all the magic. And you would go always chaperoned with two or three armed men because you were not foolish. Um, it was one thing to be eccentric, it's another thing to throw your reputation out the window. You would go to temples and learn to meditate and pray. And you watched people like work with snakes and levitate things and levitate themselves. And you learned how people did all these amazing things. And the more you learned, the more you had a yearning for Hinduism to be your reality. And the day came when you had been there for, okay, she said, wait, back up a little bit. So you would periodically return to England to make sure your girls were connected to family and stuff like that. But your girls, and you gave them the choice when they were 11 and 12. Do you want us to stay in England? Do you want us to be here more? Would you like me to send you to boarding school in England? And they were pretty grossed out by the thought. They loved what you all had in India. um, so finally you gave them their debutante year when one was 16 and the other was 17. They had their coming out year. And they had a great time. And they knew you raise them when you're in England, this is how you behave. And these are subjects we don't discuss with others. And you taught them how to do the fan, all the moves with the fan and the hidden signals, and how to show off your décolletage without being considered loose, and how to and how to dance. Like you taught them everything that they needed to learn. They knew embroidery. They knew how to play the piano forte and the harp and the blah, 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 blah. They knew all of that and they enjoyed it. But you let them live as they wished in India, whereas in England they had to be like, she's showing the corsets get pulled tight. and, and the servants were constantly rubbing lemon juice on them to try to like reduce any color. And so all of you chose to remain in India. And and the day came when you decided to devote yourself to become a Hindu nun. And you said you have to, it's, yeah. So you gave your business to your daughters who were running it with you, and they married reputable men of good fortune in the air. Like they were good. They ended up like always doing well. You built your own little mini empire there. And she said to this day, you have, descendants who are doing well in India. Um, but you decided to, you even shaved your head. Said that wasn't required of you, but you thought about when you first joined the convent, you didn't, you said part of what drew you to it was the beautiful colors everyone wore and the ability just to sit and be at peace. You said no one in England sits at peace, you know, like your husband found peace when he was being jolly. Yeah. And you would just sit there and cats loved you. When you would sit in meditation and you're like, you would sit cross-legged. Like, this was actually an act that you had to really stretch to be able to do. But you did some yoga and like you learned different ways of moving your being and you learned as you changed the musculature in your body, the energy that came into you also was able to change. Um, and you would sit in meditation and cats would come and sit in your lap and curl up around you. You're like, I have no idea. I never really had a thing for cats, but now I like them. and, um, and you had such a healing touch that you could go up to anyone who was in any non-loving state and just put your hand on them and you could see it was almost like golden light flowing from your hand through their being. And you think that's why the cats liked you so much, because you gave them just the right touch. And you'd sit in meditation, and while your mind is off wherever, your hands might even be like just resting or touching the cats because your hands knew instinctively where the cats needed golden light to flow through them. Um, and while the Hindu nuns had the particular garbs they wore, you got to wear whatever colors you wanted. You had your own seamstress who made your own outfits. So they may all be in like saffron and you'd be in like purple with saffron ribbing and everyone was very accepting of you as you were. I mean, how amazing is that? To be anywhere, anytime, to be fully accepted as you are. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, what she said, what are the nuns going to do? Not accept me? They can read energy. They know I'm one with them. And they know that if they forced me to be a certain way, I would not be able to vibrate and harmonize as I did. So you had so much joy with this lifestyle that anything that gave you joy, you would pursue with like a gusto. And so you learned how to levitate things because you're like, how fun is that? I need a quill. There it is. And you learned healing arts as you do in this life. And you said because you grew up playing the harp, you loved playing the harp and singing, um, and you could see the lines of energy connecting things, you would play the lines of energy like you're playing a musical instrument, sending love notes. And she says, you can do that too. You just never thought of it. um, so she's not giving me her name. That's so strange. She's giving me so many details, but it's for you. It's for you. Um, you can meet with her at any point. And in dreamland, imagine her life. And she says, imagine any part of my life because there's plenty there to connect with at any time. She's so proud of her life and what she made of it. Um, she says she has been with you since the moment you agreed to help your son in this life. This past life spoke up and said, I'm going with you. Because, and she said she's been stymied because she hasn't been able to help you as much. You know, like she said, it's like getting through the chinks in your armor. But now that you know of her, you can connect with her. She's saying do some research on England in that time, on the Mediterranean in that time. She said they were in the southern part of Italy, on India in that time, on Hindu nuns. Um, and she said her convent did very well because she just kept, like, her business sense was so good and her daughters were so good that the huge amount of money she had just kept increasing and increasing. So she was like, hey, nuns, let me give you a lot of money. Let's, like, so they set up a school which fits in well with, you know, what you do. And they sponsored a lot of young women to have strong self-esteem. So she says, you can't help it wherever you go. It's your natural inclination to teach and heal and support others for their paths. So in this life, don't put yourself down for having this desire. That doesn't make you a busybody. It just makes you part of being true to yourself. But work on the techniques of what can I do to help this person at this time? All right. Uh, you know how, like, when people teach classes, when they're first learning to teach, if they're doing a 2 hour class, they try to cram like 20 hours of information into a 2 hour class. And then when they get more experience as teachers, they know I just need 20 minutes of information to fill a 2 hour class. She said, right now, for you to help everyone else with nurturing themselves, you're going from the beginning teacher to the, so she said it's nothing to do with you as a good person or a busybody or a know-it-all or all the ridiculous names you've been called. Those names are called because you're honing your skills to get to that 20-minute point. So she said any poor self-esteem that has to do with any of that you can immediately release, because that lets you know, oh, this is something I'm working on to develop this technical skill. And a technical skill has nothing to do with who you are in your soul.
Interesting, some of what you shared.